Hello, you two pipers. It's Double O Pipe here, aka Rick. I lit my pipe before we started. It's Rossi Rubino, filled with Prince Albert. I wanted something different, so that's what it was. And I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to go. Let me move this over a little bit. I had to go to smokingpipes.com after getting that gift certificate and get something for me. How bad is that? I swore off. I said I wouldn't buy another pipe for I don't know how long, but I just couldn't handle it. So I had to buy me something. So I got a tub of Granger, a tub of Trafalgar, and a different Rossi pipe. So my picture of Paladin Piper in his Superman shirt. One of these days I'll get it right. I'll keep trying. Funny thing is, after I made that order and I got the order in the email, I looked down, said billed to me, shipping to David. Boy, would he have been surprised. Boy, would I have been surprised if I hadn't looked at that, because I called him and said, whoa, wait a minute, you got the wrong person. It's going to the wrong person. Boy, yeah, David would have been surprised. And I'd have been sitting there waiting, wondering where my order was. I don't know how that happened, but it did. The the air conditioner guy came by to do his inspection on the air conditioning unit. Nice guy, real chatty. Whereas I'm used to people talking about this level all my life. He was talking at this level loud. I mean, you could hear him 2 houses over. He's just a really loud talker. Hunter ran to the back immediately. Like I say, nice guy. Knew his business. But boy, was he. His volume when he spoke was just way, way loud. I mean, I talk like this, but he was like 3 stories higher. Wow. I'm just not used to that. My dad was a very quiet man, soft-spoken, rarely spoke at all. And my mother was very quiet and soft-spoken. So I grew up in a house where the people did not talk that loud or that much. My dad rarely spoke. You listened if he did. And Mom, because of that, rarely spoke either, because Dad rarely could carry a conversation or would carry a conversation. He was just a withdrawn individual. I mentioned something yesterday about that house that was next door to my aunt's house, that I just knew it was haunted. Well, I don't know. It was very low to the ground, kind of squat, with a flat roof. I don't think it had been painted in decades, so The outside was the color of a cadaver, gray and dead, just oppressive. And it had a small porch. The wood was just weather beaten and worn and dark with age. The steps were wood and had a path worn into them going diagonally to the front door or to the door. Through the years, just feet hitting those steps. You've seen it where the wood is kind of worn. Little valleys where the steps were. It had railing on the side, and you could see where the tops of the railings had been painted at one time green, but this was so long ago that the green had turned into an ugly powdery green. It was just and the screen door that led into there was a small room inside. The screen door creaked like that old show, The Creaking Door, creaked like that, and you could hear it when you opened it over at my aunt's house. It creaked that loud. And you'd open the inside door and you'd walk in, and you'd be in a tiny room, dark room, with a window from the floor to the ceiling over here with separate panes. I don't know how many panes there were in it. And the glass itself was that Ripley kind of glass. That when you looked through, it wasn't a clear sighting of what was on the other side, but wavy because of the glass being that way. And when you got in there was no light in this little room. It was dark. You'd close the door, and to the right over here was a chair. Not a soul ever sat in that chair. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, which kind of permeated the air, stirred up when you closed the door. And you could hear little things scrabbling around behind the chair and in the walls. And there was a door, I guess 6 feet maybe from the door you just entered. There was a door that went into the house. There was a door on the left as well as that window. But this little room, I guess it used to be like a welcoming foyer or something, but this had no welcoming to it. It was just dark, eerie, dusty, and critters. I know there were critters over there because there were little scratchy noises as you went through. I know I saw lizards scattering to wherever they go. And usually from the time I went through that door to the time I went through that door was like that, because I hated that room and I didn't want to stay in it. And slammed that door. Once you got through that door, like I said, this building was like it squatted on the land. I don't know who built this building, but it was just, to me, the ceilings were not like the ceilings you have in a house today. Much lower. I mean, my parents didn't have to stoop or anything, but you've got maybe 4 or 5 feet above you whenever you're in a room. Not this one, maybe 3 feet. Maybe 3 feet. like I said, it just felt like it pressed down on you. And on the inside, there was wallpaper, but it was a yellowed wallpaper, old. And the ceilings were that same cadaver gray because they hadn't been touched with paint in years either. Well, that room that you entered was like a long hallway from the back of the house to the front of the house. It was like a bowling alley. And the kitchen took up the right side. And from the kitchen, you walked through a doorway, and my room was there. And then right next to my room, going through an open doorway, was my parents' room. And there was a door frame directly across from the closed door behind me. That was my parents' room, and my room was right next. Now, at the end of the bowling alley area, because we used it as a room. We had a table down at the end, and we had the radio sitting right next to my parents' doorway that we used to sit in front of and watch the radio as our programs came on. Now, at the end of the room, or the bowling alley as I think of it, to the left was a room that was on that side of the house. And that room had another wall with like a window frame. It's a strange little house. Later, when our later years were there, they moved my bedroom to there. When I got sick one summer, and I was there. It's still back there. Now, in my room, when you turned on the light, it was a light bulb hanging from a wire. You've seen the old movies where they have those wires coming from the ceiling with a light bulb. Well, when you'd flip the switch, and I knew, oh, I do now, that electricity had to have been slowed down by this house and the wiring in this house. Because when it went through the wire and up into the bulb, that bulb, it didn't shine very bright at all. It was a yellow cast, pretty much, and they were like shadows that followed you around from that one light bulb. And I swear to you, to this day, I have 100-watt bulbs and everything, because that's what the lighting was like there. Well, the bathroom went through a door at the end of my room. There was a doorway, and the bathroom was there. There was an old iron cast, enameled tub that sat on lion's feet. You've seen those with a ball in it, or whatever they were. It looked like lion's feet. Same thing, light up the top, very dull yellow brightness. I mean, it was enough you could see, but that was about it. There was no real clear definition to anything, because the light wasn't that, it wasn't bright enough to give you a good look at whatever you were looking at. Well, I was in the tub one of these days when we lived there, and I was sitting there, and my mother unlocked that door to the next room, because this was the room that was always locked. Nobody was supposed to go in this room. Well, my mother unlocked it, opened it up, and when she did, the steam from the tub was sucked into it. Felt like all the warmth was sucked into it. All that light was sucked into it. It was like a black hole. And she passed the threshold, and I got out of the tub and wrapped a towel around me, and I started to go in there. My mother picked me up and held me real close, slammed that door, and locked it. I said, but I wanted to see what was in there. She said, no, you don't want to go in there. I said, why not? I said, you went in there. She said, yep, and I'll never go back in there again. And she started drying me off, and she was just rubbing real hard with that towel like she'd never done before. And her hands were shaking, and she looked like she was afraid. And then she got me all dry and picked me up, stepped out of the bathroom, and slammed the door to the bathroom too. She said, I don't want you to ever go in that room. You understand? I said, why not? She said, because that's a storage room, and the landlord said not to go in there. I said, well, why did you go in there? She said, I was curious. I said, what did you see? And she said, I don't want to talk about this anymore. So we never talked about it again. And it just, I don't know, it made me draw into myself. Didn't want to talk about it either. And I used to go to the outside and try to look in to see. But those windows were so dark that they acted like mirrors. And you couldn't see in there, even if you put your hands up to it. It was just darkness. It looked like there might be some movement in there, which was kind of scary. But you couldn't really see anything, and it was quiet, deathly quiet. All the other windows, you could look through them. They didn't have that darkness that this room did. And anytime that I was in the house, like I said last time, I always wanted the doors to be unlocked. It's the only house I've ever been in that I have unlocked the doors. Every other house I felt safe, sound, and always locked the doors so you could feel that extra security. This house, without my parents knowing, I always unlocked that door because I wanted to get out. I didn't want to stay in. I felt like there was more inside that could do something to me than there was outside. So I was ready to run through those doors, through that dark room, and get outside into the night rather than stay in that house if I felt scared enough to leave. There was just an oppressiveness about that place. Like I say, the ceilings themselves felt like they were just pushing down on you. And the walls with that old wallpaper that's kind of peeling, yellowed. I don't know why nothing was ever changed. I guess Dad figured that he was renting, and if the fellow wanted it, he could pay for it. And all the lights in the house came from the ceiling, from just a wire dangling down. And all were with those they must have been 10-watt bulbs, that's all I can say. Because the light was, it was just a spooky place. Spooky. In that front room where you had to enter, I don't know when anybody had ever sat in that chair, and I'm in the layer of dust on it must have been that thick. Because just opening and closing the door and the wind wafting across it would lift some of that dust up so that you smelled it if you stayed in that room long enough, because I didn't stay in there long enough. And I ran right through and closed that door to keep that blocked off. And then there was that room that you had to go through, and then there was the locked room called the storage room. I swear, whenever she opened that door that night, the light looked like it was being dragged in. The steam from the bathtub was being dragged in, and then I got up and put that towel around me, and I don't think I was being dragged in, but I was going in to see what was going on whenever she ran out of that room, closed the door, locked it, and grabbed me up. Never forget that. I don't know what she saw in there, but she never went back in. She hid that key. My mother didn't like that house either. My dad worked the night shift, so he was asleep during the day, and during the night he was gone. So he was a very practical man. I don't think that place being haunted or anything like that would ever even enter his mind. He was there to live, and he lived there. But yeah, that house definitely made an impression on me as a kid. We moved out and moved 2 houses down from my grandmother's. It must have been '58 or something like that we moved. No. We moved to another part of the island. I was in 4th grade, so that would have been 56. 56 we moved out of that house. And it was fine with me, other than the fact that we lived next door to, that's why I stayed so much over at my cousin's house, because I just didn't want to be in that house. So anyway, many years later, I think I must have been in either Pensacola or Florence, South Carolina, and got the news that since that house had been vacated and it was empty, some we used to call them bums, but now they call them homeless people. Some homeless person had snuck in there and somehow caught the place on fire and it burned to the ground. I had a big smile on my face when I heard that, but I was surprised that that house didn't take a week to burn. It just, that was a spooky place, and I was real young, and that spookiness just went inside of me as long as we lived there. So much for a kid. I don't know, it's my imagination, but my mother sure locked that door hurry, and she picked me up like she didn't want me to get near it, slammed it, locked it, went out of the bathroom, closed that door too, and later on that night hid that key somewhere where nobody could find it. I don't know what it could have been. Maybe she had an active imagination too. All right, I've rambled on enough. Folks, take care. All these crazy memories. I don't know. It's been fun. Thanks for listening. Hope it didn't bore you too much. Oh, jeepers. Take care of yourselves. May God bless you. Until the next time. Bye-bye.